Even if one were to speak the qualities of a fully enlightened Buddha, day and night, for 1,000 years, continuously, after 1,000 years, the list would still not be completed. And so I must say at the beginning of this talk that I feel absolutely unworthy to even mention the name of the Buddha. This is the very old traditional Sakya tradition of Tibet, very ancient. And I'm English, of course, and these are my teachers. Obviously, Holiness is the head of the whole school, global tradition. This picture here is the 41st Sakya Tenzin. Sakya means the name of the tradition, and Tenzin means throne holder. And then these are the teachers, the two Khenpos. Khenpo means abbot, and they are very realised and high, and I am merely I don't know what to say, nothing, some kind of, completely unworthy. And then, of course, above all of us, or at the level of His Holiness, is actually the Buddha, fully enlightened Buddha Shakyamuni. And so the traditional way to start these talks is to, out of respect to the Buddha, because without the Buddha, we wouldn't have the Buddha's teachings. Obviously, the Buddha is the ultimate supreme teacher of all spiritual knowledge. And the way to explain Buddhahood is very complicated, very profound. The when a being becomes a fully enlightened Buddha, it is said that even if one were to speak the qualities of a fully enlightened Buddha, day and night, for 1,000 years, continuously, after 1,000 years, the list would still not be completed. And so I must say at the beginning of this talk that I feel absolutely unworthy to even mention the name of the Buddha, because there is absolutely no connection in any way. I've got nothing compared, it's beyond our comprehension of fully enlightened Buddha, but there are levels of realization, 10 bhumis, we call bhumi in Sanskrit means ground. There are 10 grounds of realization before complete Buddhahood when this appears. And those 10 levels, the beings on those 10 levels are known as bodhisattvas. And then between the first of those 10 levels and where we are, there are gods and all sorts of various levels of pure beings, high beings, realized beings. And when Buddha appeared in this world, visited this world for the sake of mankind 2,500 years ago, he sought out the two highest teachers in this world. And the first one he sought out was the transcender of all perception. So perception means seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching. Our sensory perception of every being, all beings, the sensory perception of all beings is generally known as perception. So try to understand that the word perception in this talk, according to the Buddha's teachings, perception means the sensory perception of every single being that has ever been born since beginningless time, is alive now, or ever will be alive. That word perception just means seeing, smelling, hearing, touching, tasting, and thinking, because we count the mental consciousness as a sensory perception as well. So everything that goes on in what we call the relative mind is known as perception. So the first teacher that the Buddha encountered was he was the transcender, or he had transcended completely perception. So what does that mean? It means he has realized that perception is not real, and his mind had transcended the belief in perception. Basically what it is very deep, but basically what it means is he realizes that when the eye, for example, grasps an object, and carries the colour and shape of that object through the body, through the channels, down into the mental consciousness, and that mental consciousness then turns it into the object. For example, when you look at a flower, you just think flower. But actually what is out there isn't that word. It isn't even that phenomena. It's just our idea of flower. Anyway, it's very deep. You can transcend all appearances, all sounds, all tastes, all touch, everything. Once you're in meditation, you can get to a point in the mind where all of that is realized for what it really is, rather than the way that ordinary beings like us do it, which is perceive all of the perceptions as actually real. So it's very deep. So this was, obviously, we're talking about the highest realized masters in the world when the Buddha appeared. So he visited this one first, and it took him 3 days after 3 days, this very high master who had 30,000 followers said, "It's taken me my whole life to reach this level, and you've done it in 3 days." And the Buddha said, "Yes." And he said, "Right, so, well, there's 2 of us now in this world, so now you go off and you start your own, school, because there's no point in us both teaching this ultimate level." And Buddha said, no, this isn't the ultimate level. It's very high, very good, you've done very well to transcend those things, but it's not the end, it's not the final result. And he left. And then he found an even higher teacher, the other highest teacher, which is the one who transcended consciousness, the actual power, mental power, which powers the senses. Consciousness is basically an energy, which is a pure awareness. Not completely pure, but it's not contaminated by concept. It's not contaminated by objects. It's just a very raw energy. One example of consciousness is when you wake up in the morning, consciousness comes out of the heart, up through the throat. By the way, that's the point at which you dream, and fills the senses. And that is what we call waking up. And when you go to sleep, when you start feeling tired, that is the consciousness energy wishing to return to the heart center to regenerate. And as it withdraws from the senses through the heart center, again, that is when you dream. So every being that dreams either dreams as they're falling asleep or as they're waking up. In the middle bit, the deep sleep, there's no dreaming because there's no energy going, there's no consciousness going through the heart, through the throat center. Anyway, so consciousness is an energy, but it's not the ultimate energy. Consciousness is a kind of awareness, a mind, but it's not the ultimate awareness, it's not the ultimate mind. It's still produced. But anyway, the Buddha met the transcender of consciousness. And again, within 3 days, he attained the transcendence of consciousness. And again, the great master said, "It took me a lifetime to realize this, to get to this level and realize the mind beyond consciousness, and you've done it in 3 days." And the Buddha said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, there's no point in you staying here and us both teaching all these thousands. You might as well go off." And he said, no. Again, he said, no, this isn't the ultimate. I will go off, but there's further, there's more to relinquish, to transcend than this. This isn't the ultimate result. And then the Buddha went very famously to what is known as the tree of enlightenment, or the Bodhi tree, the royal tree, and took his seat and stayed there unmoving for 6 years. And in that 6 years transcended the final subtle states of concept, of anything, of the very final subtle veils of the pure mind, until he reached the absolutely pure mind, what we call the absolute clarity. And in that absolute clarity, that is what is known as Buddhahood or full enlightenment. But, there is a huge ascension, purification of mind, which leads to that final stage. When you must understand that when Buddha was born, this is going to be confusing saying this, but when Buddha was born, he was already fully enlightened. It's very confusing. What it means is his mind was already completely pure. What he was doing in his life was going through the process so that it could be documented and taught to us today. That was the whole point of Buddha's life. Buddha didn't actually attain anything in this life. Buddha attained everything in a higher realm, and but then came here to show that it could be done in a human body. So that's quite confusing. Now, the reason this talk, public talk, is happening is because side effects or byproducts of Buddha's teaching. Obviously, the Buddha's teaching, the reason Buddha appeared in this world is for all beings to liberate the mind, not for all beings to be liberated. It's normally in the beginning we do say that all beings are suffering. The very first teaching that the Buddha gave to people, to mankind, was called the truth of suffering. 4 Noble Truths. The first of the 4 Noble Truths is the truth of suffering. And the reason for that is because people ignore the suffering of life. They deny the suffering of life. And you absolutely cannot do that if you want to realize the truth. That is why it's called the truth of suffering. No one wants to hear about the truth. No one wants to hear that the truth of life is suffering. Everyone wants to have happy life, survival, pleasure, good time, enjoyment. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the truth is, life is a constant struggle and a constant challenge. And when you realize that life, in essence, is a constant survival struggle and challenge, it's very wonderful. It's very freeing. It's not a bad thing to know at all. It's just that our ego, our self-preservation, our sense of self, without investigation, without examination, without checking, it just feels that it doesn't want to know about the bad side of life. But the truth is, as Buddha said, if you investigate the truth of life, the fact that it is a constant struggle, there's a very, very great freedom, a realization, a liberation of its own type, which is a wonderful, freeing experience for the mind. And all it takes is for one to be honest about life. That is why it's called the truth of suffering. No one is honest. Everyone is denying suffering, thinking that if they deny it, if they put a lid on it, if they ignore it, it will go away. It won't happen. That's never going to be the case, because that's not the truth. And so the first teaching Buddha gave is the truth of suffering. And what that means is he's just saying, acknowledge that existence, that life, birth, the whole thing brings, all the time, in one way or another, brings suffering. For example, one of the main sufferings in this world today is money. There are 3 types of people involved in this suffering of money. It covers all humans. There are people who have not got enough money. There are people who have got enough money, and there are people who have got too much money. The people who haven't got enough money are worried about not having enough money. The people who have got enough money are worried that they've got enough. And the people that have got too much are worried about it running out. And so all 3 classes, it's all suffering. Money causes nothing but suffering of worry, no matter where you are in that scale. And therefore, money causes suffering. And yet, when people think of money, they think it's great. They think it's a good thing. They think they want it. But actually what you're wanting is suffering, because money is always suffering, no matter how much. We've just proved that no matter how much you have, it causes suffering. So that's very interesting. And that is the second of the 4 Noble Truths, which is the origin of suffering. The first Noble Truth that Buddha taught is the truth of suffering, accepting that life is a constant challenge. And the second one is the origin of suffering. And the origin of suffering is attachment. Money is attachment. Wanting money is caused by, so the attachment to wanting money is caused by the attachment to the self. The self means, the self is, I'll try to explain it because it's a very profound subject, but basically the self causes the fear. The self, what we call myself, is actually the mind imputing on this body an individual character, an individual identity. That concept, that habit of the mind, that constant grasping, clinging to the idea of a personal, individual, independent self from everyone else, from everything else, is the cause of so much fear, so much anxiety, so much suffering. What will happen to me? I don't want anything bad to happen to me. I want good things to happen to me. That is the constant tendency, the constant habit, the constant circuitous, circular loop thinking that goes on day and night. The main reason the Buddha appeared in this world is to say, stop that. Don't do that anymore. Because the idea of the self is just an idea. It's merely a mental imputation on this body. And what Buddha said was, this isn't the only life. Before this life, many, many, many lifetimes. And after this life, if you're still clinging to the idea of self, then that is what will cause the future life. Every single life is caused by the mind clinging to the idea of self, clinging to the idea of existence. Every single life, every single being is born because of that. If you give that up, realize that that's not true. The mind doesn't need to have a self. Birth stops. And that is the meaning, the true meaning of nirvana. Nirvana, the Sanskrit word, very commonly used. You know, there are health spas in this country called nirvana. It's ironic, really, because nirvana means extinguishment. It means no more suffering. But of course, to want no more suffering is to really want no more suffering. You have to realize that life is suffering, and no one wants to admit that. No one wants to accept that. Everyone wants life to be great. Everyone wants life to be pleasure. Everyone celebrates birth. Everyone is terrified of death. It's like celebrating left and being absolutely terrified of right. Birth and death are exactly the same thing. If you have one, you definitely have to have the other. You can't just, in the same way as you can't just have left, you can't just have up, you can't just have hot. You know, it's literally a mutually dependent phenomena. And again, as I said before, when you realize that they are mutually dependent, there's a freedom that comes from that. It's not scary. By ignoring death, you don't get rid of it. By ignoring aging, you can't get rid of it. By ignoring illness, you can't get rid of it. So ignoring suffering never works, but that is the strategy of 99% of the beings on this planet. Not just the humans, animals also. Everyone is trying to ignore the things they don't like. And what Buddha is saying is, absolutely don't do that. Face the things that you don't like, examine them, and you will find out they're nowhere near as bad as you think. All of these things that we fear, when you actually check them, nowhere near as bad. But as long as they remain in our peripheral vision and we're trying to ignore them, look away, keep them in our blind spot, they are terrifying. It's not that bad. If you look at them really and examine them, everything properly, it actually takes on a whole new understanding. And that understanding is known as wisdom. Wisdom is the most wonderful thing. Unfortunately, everyone gets it mixed up with knowledge. Everyone gets it mixed up with intelligence. Completely different. Knowledge and intelligence deal with concept. Wisdom deal with truth. Concept is not truth. They're completely different things. If you try to use concept to attain enlightenment, it will never happen. If you use truth, it will happen very quickly. That is the difference between intellectual knowledge, academic knowledge, and what we call transcendental wisdom. Transcendental wisdom means transcend all your concepts, transcend all your beliefs. When you transcend all the concepts and all the belief, all the worldly conventions, the mind is freed into its own natural state. The mind, the heart mind, is freed into the absolute purity that was here before any beings arrived, before any beings were produced. Beings are produced by concept, erroneous consciousness. That is why these high masters transcend perception, transcend consciousness. And then the Buddha actually transcended mind itself to get to the absolute truth, the pure clarity, what we call the pure clarity void. And that pure clarity void is perfect joy. It's not oblivion. It's a absolutely perfectly joyful, excellent, blissful state, because it's the absolute truth. But of course, we don't grasp at that, because that would be grasping at pleasure again. It's just the natural bliss. It's the natural happiness. It's the natural joy. You don't need to grasp for it. All you need to do is remove all the obstructions, all the conceptual graspings and clinging to life, and it is revealed, it emerges. So this is the problem. So the third of the Four Noble Truths, the first one is the truth of suffering, the second one is the truth of origin, and the third one is nirvana, the truth of cessation, meaning simply that if one realizes the origin of our suffering, all the suffering of life, the suffering of existence, the suffering of survival, and the suffering that self-grasping, self-imputation causes, once one knows the problem, then one can solve the problem by giving up that way of thinking. We need to change our way of thinking. Our way of thinking causes us so much suffering. And why don't we just give it up? The reason we don't give it up is because we're used to it. We're familiar with it. And this ability of the mind to familiarize with what it does is very, very, I don't want to say harmful, because it depends. If the mind is familiar with negative, unhelpful, harmful thoughts, as it is with most of the people in the world today, it's harmful, of course. It creates suffering. But also this ability of the mind to familiarize can also, as Buddha said, can be changed to positive things. You can familiarize the mind with patience. You can familiarize the mind with loving kindness. You can familiarize the mind with compassion. You can familiarize the mind with sharing and caring and being warm and helpful, respectful and sweet to others. You can familiarize the mind with not being harmful, having no aggression, having no retaliation at all, no thoughts of revenge. You can familiarize the mind with detachment. Instead of being attached to your country, instead of being attached to the color of your skin, instead of being attached to your bank statement, instead of being attached to your home, instead of being attached to your body, you can be free. You can familiarize the mind with wisdom. That's the choice. We've got that choice in every single moment of using this mind. So, how to do it? Funnily enough, the Tibetan word for meditation is gom. That is why the Tibetan temples are known, monasteries are often referred, the main shrine room is known as gompa. It means meditation place. But the word gom, if you translate it literally, it means familiarization. So meditation means familiarization. So at first, if you're not interested in meditation, sitting down and doing meditation, of course, you can practice the familiarization of more positive minds in your daily life. You can use opportunities that you would normally react negatively to react positively. And that will work to a certain extent. But the reason meditation is so important is that it changes the mind on a deeper level. It familiarizes the mind very quickly and very strongly with very positive, helpful things. Using meditation, using concentrated, single-pointed, concentrated familiarization techniques, you can get rid of the causes of suffering forever. Just trying to change our actions, our reactions in our daily life is like pruning. It's just reduces the power of negative reactions. It reduces our hatred. It reduces our desire. It reduces our pride. It reduces our envy. But it doesn't get rid of it. It just controls it. Through meditation, for example, pride. Pride is a huge problem. Some people are so prideful, so arrogant, so egotistical that they show off when they're talking to others. Right? That is quite extreme. Most people, they are nowadays. It's getting worse, but most people are still careful not to show off when they deal with each other. But what we tend to do is slip something into the conversation that is a bit show-offy, and this is getting worse in the world today. But the Dharma practice, to change the mind, obviously what we're doing is dealing with the mind. And if you are mindful, this again, very common in the world today, this word mindfulness. Mindfulness actually means you check to see what the mind is doing. And if you check to see what the mind is doing tomorrow when you're at work or when you're shopping or whatever you're doing, you will notice that you show off to yourself. It's a very strange thing, but we boost ourselves by saying how marvellous we are at doing something. When we are successful in cooking a nice meal, or a nice flower grows in our garden, or whatever, only some very trivial things need to go well. They have some kind of success, and you will find that you are showing off to yourself. The mind is rejoicing in the self's success. This is a very strange, in the Buddhist world, this is a very strange phenomena that we try to stop, because it's ego. Even though it's only subtle, it is a form of arrogance that is very unhelpful, because it increases the sense of self. In Tibet, when someone outwardly displays a delusion, it is treated very differently to someone displaying that delusion in the West. If you go into a shop in the West and someone is shouting at the person behind the counter, arguing, everyone stands back. They're a bit frightened of the person. They're angry, etc., etc. In Tibet, if that happens, everyone gathers round. They get the person a chair, and that person is sat down and treated like an invalid, treated like someone who is suffering from an invalid state of mind, a disease, a mental disease, and everyone gathers round, and as if someone has fallen over and hurt themselves. That's the mentality, and that is the truth. That's what we need to do. People need to have compassion and kindness, and reach out to people who are suffering from the delusions of desire, not accept desire. Obviously our media, the advertising, etc., is all lust and attachment, and buy this latest car and you'll be happy. And we need to feel sorry, have empathy, sympathy for the people making those adverts, trying to use that strategy to make money. We need to have compassion for those people, because they have the disease of greed and deception and sales. This whole American idea now spreading throughout the world, or has been spreading for decades now, of capitalism, and the happiness will come from making money. It obviously doesn't work, but it's the system that we've got. The Buddhist way, or if you are, if you're interested in the positive, virtuous actions according to Buddha, you have compassion for anyone who is displaying in any way these negative, selfish tendencies. Because greed, although we can dress business up as the way of life and the way the system works and everyone needs to earn money, and actually it boils down to something that is making people very selfish and isolating families from each other, isolating people from each other. Profit and profit margins and salaries and trying to get a rise and trying to chase that promotion at work, it is all promoting this independent, competitive, isolated, self-survival, self-preservation mind. Very bad. Because the truth is we're not separate. It is so obvious that we are all the same. We are all born from each other. Our parents go back far enough. We've got the same parents. It's all the same, all the same. The skin is the same, bone is the same, blood is the same, mind is the same, consciousness is the same, thinking is the same. There's a very famous story I'd like to tell at this point, which is there was a very great practitioner in the south of India called Bahir. And Bahir means the bark clad. He was a wandering ascetic and very, very calm, certain attainment. I don't know, I can't say exactly what level he'd attained, but he was very good. And he was in meditation one day. All he wore was bark, tree bark, nothing else. He would completely renounce the world. He was excellently pure as a practitioner, and he was meditating one day, and a female spirit arose in front of him and said, you need to go and find the teacher. And he said, which teacher? And she said, the Buddha. Just go north, ask for the Buddha. When you find him, you ask him what you need to know. You have some questions, you ask. And so he left immediately. Immediately. It took 6 months walking from the south of India to the north of India to the forests, asking, and eventually someone said, yeah, I think he's like 100 miles north, and then 50 miles, and eventually he got there. And when he got to the forest, what they called the squirrel sanctuary, where there was 3,000 monks, Buddha wasn't there. And he asked around, and they said, no, Buddha is collecting alms in the village, in the town. He'll be back, you wait. So he said, no, I can't wait. It's taken me 6 months. And ran and found the Buddha going from house to house, collecting alms in the bowl. And ran up to Buddha, and Buddha said, I know you have questions, but you go back, I'll be back. And he said, no, I can't wait. Please answer the question. What is it that I need to know? And the Buddha said, yes, I already know the question. I can't, not now. This is not appropriate. This is not the place. You go back to the forest, I'll be there. And he said, no, I haven't got time. I need to know. What is it I need to know? That is the question. And in the end, he'd asked 3 times. And the Buddha said, I am a fully enlightened Buddha, and you've asked me 3 times, and therefore I must answer. And the answer to your question is, all seeing is the same. For all beings, all seeing is the same. There's no such thing as personal seeing. All hearing is the same. There's no such thing as personal hearing. All smelling is the same. There's no such thing as personal smelling. All tasting is the same. There's no such thing as personal tasting. All touching is the same. There's no such thing as personal touching. And all thinking is the same. There's no such thing as personal thinking. And with that, Bahir, the bark clad, said, oh, that is it. That's wonderful. Thank you. And ran off. And later on, that evening, one of the great attendants came to Buddha, and Buddha said, Bahir is dead. And the attendant said, yes. And he said, he attained the first bhumi. So he said, and the Buddha said, do you know how he died? And the attendant said no. And he said, hit by an ox cart, meditating on what I told him. But anyway, before he died, the karma ripened. That's the receiving a teaching from the Buddha, it can have that effect, unfortunately. Karma is a very strange thing. But anyway, he attained his mind was purified enough to attain the first bhumi, and so therefore Buddha said, you collect the remains and you put them in a stupa, and if you go to India today, I think it's near Varanasi, the stupa is still there from thousands of years ago, the Bahir stupa. Anyway, the main point is the Buddha's teaching. We see and we think it's personal. We hear, we think it's personal. Our voice, we think it's personal. This is very profound, very deep what I'm telling you. But this personalization of anything, seeing, thinking, smelling, voice, action. If you can just reduce that and stop personalizing it so much, everything is better. All the stress and the anxiety is reduced. It's through our self-grasping, it's through the ridiculously overwhelming significance that we put on everything, every experience as personal, which ruins us. It causes us so much anxiety and stress and worry. Personal, what will happen to me? What's going to happen if I run out of money? If I get ill? If I start dying? There's no self. The body is. If you want to investigate, as Buddha said, investigate. If you investigate the body, you cannot find the self in the bones. You cannot find the self in the skin. You know as well as I do that your body came from the parents. You didn't even choose the name. You didn't choose the body. You didn't choose the place, the location. You don't make the heart beat. You don't make the lungs breathe. Nothing about it is, we don't have control over any of it. It's a completely autonomous system that came from the parents. So why? Even the name, we didn't choose our own name. It was given to us by others. So why? The question I'm asking you this evening is, why do we identify with it so heavily, so personally? That's the big question the Buddha visited this planet to ask and to teach us that it's incorrect. Once you realize you're free, enlightenment is actually known as liberation. Liberation means liberating the mind from this narrative, from this story. This life is like a movie. Like all movies, it ends. But like all movies, it's just a movie. It's not real. The actual reality of the movie is the light in the projector. That light in the projector is known as the absolute clarity, the clear light, the Buddha nature. That is the only real thing, and that never changes. That is the same now as it was before there were any beings. And it will be the same after all the beings have stopped being produced. That clear light is the real thing, and it's known as the Buddha nature. And the reason it's known as the Buddha nature is because it's the nature of the Buddha. And therefore, as Buddha said, there's no such thing as Buddha. And what I'm saying to you is, if there's no such thing as Buddha, which is the absolute purest, supreme, greatest being, what does that mean for us, our existence? So this idea, this significance, this obsession, this addiction that we have to our existence, our personal character identity, is insane. That is what drives us crazy. If you can just reduce it day by day, let it go, relax, and realize what the mind really is. Realize that it's just a projected concept, all of it, everything, good and bad. Every single concept, every single idea, every single belief that we've got is manipulated by the self. If you are deciding what is good and bad, and there is one other being who doesn't agree, for example, you say flowers are beautiful, flowers are good, flowers are wonderful, and then someone who suffers from hay fever comes in the room, they don't think the same thing. That shows that it's only your perception. Good and bad is subjective. You are deciding. It's not ultimately good or bad. Nothing is. But we believe that. We believe that it is. We truly believe that something is truly real, truly good, truly bad. These beliefs, these concepts, these are what drive the mind crazy. Because the mind in reality doesn't have any of these characteristics, doesn't have any of these choices. There's nothing more real or unreal, more significant or insignificant than anything else. From the point of view of the real mind, it's everything is relative. The Buddha taught these two truths, which is the relative truth and the ultimate truth. And the relative truth is the names and the functions and the idea of things that we normally have in ordinary life. But the ultimate truth is, the mind projecting. The way that we project this idea of things in the mind, the ultimate truth is it's just a projection. This is very, very helpful. Please understand the reason I'm telling you this, the reason the Buddha brought this to mankind is because by realizing that life isn't anywhere near as serious and as real as we think it is. There's so much suffering which comes from overcompensating, and what do we call it? Overestimating, overvaluing. Yeah, that's it. Overvaluing. We overvalue everything. We give everything so much value that it becomes completely stressful. And the slightest thing going wrong is like a disaster. And the slightest thing going right, is exciting. And it's ridiculous. Just completely confuses the mind, because in essence, the mind knows none of it is real. So the secret is relax. First of all, relax. And the fourth of the Four Noble Truths is what Buddha called the Noble Eightfold Path. And these 8 things are just very noble attitudes. Right view, right speech, right action. And all right means is not selfish, not harmful. Whenever you speak to someone, kindly. Don't imbue your speech with anything selfish, showing off, arrogance, ego, pride, hatred, envy. No double meaning in your speech. You're just helpful, lovely. You imagine if the whole world was like this. Everyone truly respected someone else. Everyone was careful when they spoke. And right view, again, is not... I'm trying to keep this on a simple level. Right view is actually all about the lack of inherent existence of phenomena. So it's a very deep meaning. But one way to understand it is interdependence. Interdependence means that at the moment when we look at something, we think it individually exists and it has its own intrinsic value. But actually, if you look at anything, choose any object, you will see that it's made of courses, it's made of parts. And if something is made of parts, then you can't say that it is wholly independent, intrinsic on its own. And everything is constantly changing, everything is impermanent. Nothing lasts. Every single thing, even the mountains, will disappear. Everything, not one single thing lasts forever. Only the absolute clarity, the nature of mind, which has got no features. So everything that we cling to at the moment as real and valuable and significant, it's all impermanent. That's a very good way, a very simple way of understanding what one of the Noble Eightfold Path, the true view, right view means. So right view, right speech, right action. Action just means not stealing, not killing, helpful action, and all of these noble actions, right concentration, right meditation, right patience, right effort, it just means virtuous. And many people over the years have said, well, that's what I do all that. But if you check, we don't do that. We have 3 ways of acting: body, speech and mind. Now your actions might be good. Action is the easiest one to do virtuous. You do virtuous. When you go to work, you would say you work in a shop, or this is virtuous action. Even, because you are helping someone, you go and get something off the shelf, you bring it to the counter, whatever you're doing, if you're a nurse or a helper, of course, this is incredible, virtuous, helpful action. And the reflection of that in the future life will be good external physical conditions. If you spend your life stealing and killing, then obviously the reflection of that in the future life will be extremely bad conditions. Let's just leave it at that. But the point is, physical actions reflect as physical conditions in the future. Good or neutral, bad brings good, neutral or bad. Same with speech. Virtuous, lovely, respectful speech, positive speech, brings an eloquent, vast vocabulary in the future. And that will enable you to help many people by being able to speak well and describe, explain things, wonderful things to people. That's very helpful to have that. And the cause of that is eloquent speech, helpful speech, respectful, loving, kind speech in the past life. So that's a reflection of that. Now, the most important one is mind, positive mind. But of course, that is the most difficult one because, as I said, with mindfulness, if you check in your daily life what your mind is doing, there's quite a lot of negativity. When you see someone that upset you once before, there's an aversion. There's an aversion in the mind. You might think something against them. You might think something untoward, something negative. And that is unfortunate because the reflection of that in the future will be the same thing. You know, in the Dharma it says the effect is similar to the cause, which means by you disliking someone now, someone in the future will dislike you. And many people spend their life in, I mean, hatred is a strong word, but it has very many varying levels. And just having slight aversion to someone has a slight aversion effect in the future. So we must try to avoid any kind of negative thoughts. Now, negative intentions. The last month's talk was about what we call the 5 kleshas, the 5 afflictions of mind: pride, desire, hatred, envy, and ignorance. And these 5, if we can get rid of these 5, if we cannot engage in these 5 in body, speech, and mind in our life, the future is incredibly bright. The future lives, and this life, of course, it has a huge effect on this life, but from the Buddhist point of view, what we concentrate on is trying to avoid problems in the future life. So the point is, if you've got good conditions now, good health, somewhere peace and quiet to practice, meditate, read the Dharma, study the truth, learn these things that we're talking about here, alleviate the mind, relinquish all the negative actions of body, speech and mind, and take up and encourage and sustain all the positive actions of body, speech and mind, that will have an enormous and absolutely magnificent effect on the future life. And that being that then is born with all those qualities, especially the compassion and the wisdom, these 2 main qualities, they will go on to serve and help and emancipate and innumerable beings. It will snowball. That will ascend. It never goes back. What we are trying to do is create a mind that creates in the future something truly magnificent, which will free as many beings as possible, if possible all the beings, from any more suffering. That is what we call the bodhicitta wish, or the bodhisattva wish. It means, may all beings be free from suffering and the cause of suffering forever. No more suffering ever, ever again. No more suffering of birth, no more suffering of aging, no more suffering of illness, no more suffering of death. Just complete and absolute bliss, happiness, perfect wisdom, enlightenment, or in a single word, liberation, the liberation of the pure mind. So that is for the Buddhist, pure, proper practitioner, that is what they are practicing for. Not for themselves, for all beings. We don't, obviously practicing that for oneself would be completely wrong because it's the self that's the problem. So when one engages in the Buddhist practice, it is absolutely most important, critical, that the intention is for all beings and not for oneself. But of course, our habit is to be selfish. Our habit is self-preservation. And so many practitioners forget and slip into the practicing for themselves. It's a very big problem in the practice. But you will find that if you can remember to only practice for everyone else except yourself, wonderful, magnificent glorious things happen in the mind. Completely different world, completely different life, completely wonderful. All stress, worry, anxiety, fears disappear completely. And a whole new understanding, a whole new wisdom view emerges. The end. No, it doesn't have to be the end, but we can do some meditation, or you can ask some questions, or whatever you want to do. What do the two newcomers think?
It's very deep.
Very deep, sorry. But it is the fully enlightened Buddha.
Of course.
Yes, it's the ultimate. It is known as the ultimate truth.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for new people. It's very difficult for us. I've been doing it for quite a long time, and it's still, but you gradually, it proves itself. There is empirical, evidence. There's literally, you experience all of these things. Once you know, you can see it. For example, Buddha said there are 6 realms, all right, that range from the hells to the heavens. Same as in all religions. Everyone knows about it, really. But again, no one wants to really accept it. And one of the interesting things he said about these 6 realms is, by the way, the 6 realms are the hells, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, demigods and gods. It's actually 3 realms. The hungry ghosts and the hell beings are together. The animals and the humans are together. The demigods and the gods are together. And the demigods and the gods fight more than the humans, believe it or not. But anyway. Now, the point of these 6 realms is what Buddha very interestingly said, that these 6 realms are represented in the human realm. That's very interesting. So the hell realms are the murderers and the very bad, nasty, there's not many of them, fortunately, compared to the population of the world. But they are around, and they are very bad, and they just are insistent on harm. So that represents the very bad, the lowest realms. And then the hungry realm, because the main delusion which causes rebirth in the hells is anger and aggression, and so therefore represented in this world are people who are just completely always angry, always aggressive, and always looking to harm. They represent the hell realms. And the hungry ghost realm, the main delusion that causes rebirth in the hungry ghost realm is greed. And so greedy people in the human realm represent them. And the greedy people are, again, it's a difficult one, because there are many greedy people. But the problem with it is that many of the greedy, is strange, but many of the greedy people in the human realm today are quite successful. Greed seems to be paying off. Whereas the greed of the hungry ghosts, there's no paying off in the hungry ghost realm. So it's all gone a bit obscure. For a very, very long time in the past, greedy people were shunned from society and left out on the outskirts and had nothing, because people rejected the greedy people. And so that did represent the wastelands of the hungry ghosts. But nowadays, like I said, it doesn't really work, because the greedy... But maybe mentally greedy people feel isolated and always hungry, like the hungry ghosts. So we have to think of these things in terms of the mind. Then animals, the cause of being reborn as an animal is just the ignorance, is just self-grasping. Ignorance in Dharma means self-grasping. It means we don't realise that all beings are equal, and we believe in a separate self, and that is called ignorance, because we are ignorant to the fact that all beings are equal. And if you haven't got the aggression and the anger, and you haven't got the greed, but you have got the ignorance of self-grasping, then that is the main cause of the animal realm. And of course, I think that is the majority of humans. They're just normal people who don't do anything particularly bad, don't do anything particularly good. They just live, but of course there is a strong sense of self, and so that is representative of the animal realm. And then the human realm, the main cause of being born in the human realm is not having a strong sense of self, which is unusual. That's why human birth is quite rare. Not having the greed, not having the anger, but having desire. Desire is if the heaviest delusion you've got is desire, which isn't, as bad as the ignorance of self-grasping, greed or anger, then the human realm, that's the cause of birth in the human realm. And of course, that is represented by, there are many people in the human world today who are attractive. I've got to be very careful what I say here. They're very attractive, young people. They're not bad people. They don't steal, they're not greedy, etc. But they are very, very much obsessed with desire and attachment to goods. I'll leave it at that. All right. Desire is a very, very powerful delusion, which most people suffer from. And it's very important not to follow it, not to allow it to, do not justify it. When desire arises in your mind, it's a concept, it's a deluded concept. There's no need. There's no real happiness from desire or attachment. And then the demigods. The demigods are very interesting because the demigods are the gods are pride. The demigods are, what are the demigods?
Jealousy.
Oh yeah, jealousy. They're very jealous. And they're jealous, of course, they're jealous of the gods. That's why they fight. So if the worst delusion that you've got is jealousy, then the demigods. And it's a very powerful, strange, magical land, the demigods. The men are all ugly, warriors, fighty warriors, very powerful, but very ugly. And the women are absolutely beautiful, very, very beautiful. And it is said that in the demigod realm there is a lake, mirror lake. And when these demigods go off to war with the gods, the wives all gather around this huge lake and watch the war, watch the battle take place. And they see the husbands be killed by the gods. The gods always win. And that is very representative of or was, I don't know about now, but for the last few decades, that is very representative of the Middle East and the US. The US, they don't even need to try. They've got all the weapons, they've got all the money, and war is so easy for them. And the Middle East just get crushed every time. And that's very much like the gods and the demigods. So the main delusion for the demigods is jealousy. And then the god realm, pride, very strong pride. Their main delusion is not bad. Pride is not obviously it's a terrible affliction which causes a lot of suffering. But in terms of gravity, in terms of negativity, pride is the least of the 6 realms. And so if the only delusion one has got is the pride, then it's the God realm. And of course, this is reflected in the human realm as royalty and, what I suppose people call the upper class. And the one thing that they all suffer from is absolutely horrendous pride. Their mind, I shouldn't name names, but the royal family, for example, incredible pride. The whole thing is based on pride, you'll notice, this delusion of pride. And pride is a terrible, terrible thing because pride is basically arrogance, egotistical arrogance. And they think in their mind that they are better than everyone else. They try to hide it. They try to be humble. But their whole basis of their existence, the whole point of the upper class is that it's upper class. It's better than the other classes. So it's completely wrong. It's absolutely faulty. And Buddha said this is absolutely wrong. There is no, in Buddha's time, there was the caste system, which still exists to some extent in India, and he was the first one to say this is completely wrong. And in those days, to speak out against the caste system was unheard of, absolutely madness. And people thought, so many people were upset, especially the upper classes, of course, by someone. But Buddha said, no, it doesn't matter what you think. This is absolutely wrong. No being is better than any other being, and no being is worse than any other being. Every single being is absolutely equal. The ant, the flea, the god, the elephant, the human, the demigod, the hell being, they all deserve absolute joy, absolute happiness, absolute compassion, absolute sympathy, and absolute respect. Respect especially. Every being should be respected equally. There's no kings, there's no paupers, there's no peasants, and everyone must be thought of by everyone else as equal. So that's very interesting. Buddha pointing out that the 6 realms are represented in the human world. Hope you find that helpful.